Okay, so today I'm going to start showing you guys how to edit your images so that we can use them later for our 6-color reduction prints. The first thing that you have to do is have your images ready to go somewhere, whether that be on your phone or your Chromebook, and then you're going to need to be able to get them to one of my computers that have Photoshop and Illustrator already on them. So one of the best ways maybe to do that, it would be just to email them to yourself, or maybe you can upload them to your Google Docs and then download them once you're on one of my computers. But you're going to need to make sure that you get them to one of those computers, and the easiest place then is to just drag them to your desktop or save them to your desktop, and from there we can drag them into Photoshop. That's the first step you're going to do, is you're going to use Photoshop. So Photoshop, right now I have it open. Your computer may not have it at the bottom of your screen on the dock, so you're going to have to do a search for it. So it's just called Adobe Photoshop CS6. So once it's open, I can take my image. I'm going to begin with this image, but I have another image too if I want to use it. But I'm going to start with this one because I hope that this one works. So I'm going to bring it in, and the first thing that you're going to be doing is you're going to be cropping it so that it fits an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, just a regular letter size. So to do that, when I'm in Photoshop, I've got a toolbar here on the left, and the fifth tool down from the top is the crop tool. So I'm going to be using the crop tool to crop this to the right proportion. So once I hit the crop tool, yours may not automatically hit 11 by 8.5. I actually had already cropped a picture before, so it's remembering my settings. But what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to change the settings up here. If it's not to an 8.5 by 11, you're going to have to change it so that it is an 8.5 by 11. Now, if you wanted it to go the other direction, you could click it over here on this little arrow, and it would go. You could toggle between portrait or landscape. Of course, mine, I want it to go more landscape so that it fits my image. Now, if I really wanted to, I could artistically crop this piece so that it's really zoomed in. So depending on your image and how you want to play with your image artistically, this is the time that you can play with that with the cropping. So I'm actually going to leave it back to where I had it. I kind of like it this way. And then once I'm happy with it, I'm just simply going to hit enter and crop it. Then I will file save this, and this will be my cropped image. So I'm going to say file, save as. It's going to bring up some options for you. I'm going to save this as Mrs. Hannah 1. And there's a couple things. Your computer may bring up, it may try to save it as a Photoshop file. So the link, the ending letters on that looks like a PSD. It says Photoshop here. Please do not save it as a Photoshop file. Instead, you want to change it to a regular JPEG. So we have JPEG, my name, and I think I'm good to go, and I want to save it to my desktop, and I'm just going to hit save. It's going to ask you how big of quality you want your picture to be. For this project right now, let's keep it at the highest quality and hit OK. And then I don't actually need to use Photoshop for a while, so I could close it out, but for now I guess I'm just going to minimize it so that we don't see it. So here it is. So here's my desktop. Now here was my original picture, and then I renamed my cropped image Mrs. Hannah _1. So here this picture is. So once I have my image cropped, now is the fun time, and I can bring it into Illustrator and start to see what this is going to look like when we break it into 6 colors for our reduction print. So now I'm going to take it, and I can actually, instead of dragging it, why don't you guys do this? Why don't you go to Illustrator and open Illustrator first, go to File. You're going to create a new document. When this comes up, I'm going to name it Mrs. Hannah Reduction Print. You can name it whatever you want. I have it, we want to have the size to be a letter. And then depending on your orientation, if you want it to be portrait or if you want it to be landscape, then you're going to choose that. My picture is landscape, so I have it chosen here. The width is 11 by 8.5, and I want to make sure my units is set to inches. Sometimes it might be set to points or whatever, but make sure it's at inches. And you're going to hit OK. It's going to bring up your artboard. Looks like this. This is your canvas, they call this in Illustrator. And I'm going to actually place my picture in here. So I'm going to go up to File and hit File Place, which is about halfway down. And it's going to ask you to place the file from wherever on your computer. So it's going to bring this up, and I have my desktop selected, and this is my picture, Mrs. Hannah _1. And I'm going to hit Place. Now, it did blow it up a little bit bigger than it needed to be on the edges. So I might zoom out a little bit. There's a couple ways to do that. A quick, easy way is to just use your commands and hit Command minus, and you can zoom in or zoom out, and then Command plus zooms in. So depending on how you want to zoom in or out, you can also use the zoom tool over here, which is the little magnifying glass to zoom in and out. So that'll help you just viewing the document. I'm going to take my image now, and I'm going to make it smaller so that it fits into my artboard. So I'm going to grab the corner, and holding the Shift key down, this is really, really important, you guys. Please make sure you hold the Shift key down while you're changing the size of your picture. If you don't do that, you're going to end up changing the proportions, which then you're going to be guessing to see whether or not it fits or not, and that's just not going to work for us. So if it does do that, if you do accidentally change the proportions, you can just do an edit undo and just kind of step backwards. So I'm going to just hit the undo for a while here. So I'm back to where I started. I'm going to grab the corner, hold the Shift key down, and then pull. Then I can just move it around to my corner. Now I can pull this out just a little bit. And it should fit nicely into your picture because we already cropped it as an 8.5 by 11. So now I'm just going to hit Enter. Oh, I don't need to hit Enter, never mind. Forget that. I'm just going to click off it. There we go. So here's our picture. Now the first thing that we're going to do when we get into Illustrator after we resize it is we are going to make sure that the image is selected, and then we're going to go to the image trace. This is where the fun happens. So up at the top, after you've selected your picture, it won't show up if you don't select your picture. So if I select my picture, then the image trace option shows up at the top. So next to the image trace option, there's a little triangle that says tracing presets. I can click it, and down here are some options for you to trace your image. This is actually going to turn your photograph into an illustration. Because we're doing a 6-layer reduction print, we are going to use the option of the 6 colors. So I'm going to hit 6 colors. It's probably going to tell you this. And just go ahead and just hit OK. And when you hit OK, it's going to start thinking, and it's going to start creating your illustration. And this could take a minute or two, depending on how big your picture is, but hopefully it doesn't take too long. And there are my results. So now I can choose to continue on with this picture if I like it, or I can begin editing it in other ways. I actually don't mind this too much. I think it looks pretty good. I like some of the definition. You know, it could be more interesting to see some contrast and more detail in some of my image. So if that was the case, what I would do is just go back to Photoshop, and I could play with changing the contrast and changing the brightness and the different things like that, and then resaving my image as like a new file, and then bringing it back in to see if it changes the details that show up when you trace it in Illustrator. So to change the brightness and the contrast, if I'm in Photoshop, I could just go to image adjustments, and then if I wanted to, I could play with the contrast to see if I could get more details kind of showing up, maybe in his suit and his flowers, different things like that. Now, remember, the coloring doesn't necessarily matter when you're in Photoshop because it's going to trace it. What matters is the detail that you see. So by changing the brightness and the contrast, that's one way that you can add more detail or dark areas. So if I wanted to, I could hit OK, and maybe I would just say File, Save As, and this time I would maybe name it something different, like maybe it would be number 2, and I could save that on my desktop. And then once that's done, I could re-bring it in, I could retrace it, and now I would have a couple options to look at. So that's something that you're going to want to play with, is adjusting your image in Photoshop, re-bringing it back into Illustrator in order to trace it. Let's say for the sake of this tutorial that I like the image that I already have here, and I'm not going to need to bring in another picture from Photoshop. However, you guys most likely will need to do that. But let's just say for the sake of this that I like this picture, and I'm going to move forward with showing you how to reflect it, because that's something that we need to do. And then if you want to do some custom changes to your colors, I can show you how to do that as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reflect my image, because remember, when we're working with printmaking, we have to create a plate that is actually backwards from how we want it to look printed. So I'm going to, when I create my plate, I'm going to make this image backwards. So for my own visual reference, I need to do that right in Illustrator and flip it for myself so that it's easier for myself later. So before I do that though, one quick thing that I need to mention is that we're not quite done tracing the image until we hit the expand key. So if for some reason you clicked off, you have to make sure that your image is selected. And again, look at what happens to the top of the screen when I click on and off the image. Once I click the image, that expand option shows up. So go ahead and hit the expand, and it's going to turn your picture into a bunch of little points. That's how we know that it's actually in an illustrated way that we can edit it. So once it looks like that and you've got all the little ants and the dots, then you're good to go. So I can unclick it for right now. Then I can go ahead and reflect it like I mentioned before. So to reflect it, go up to Object. Oops, sorry. Make sure that your picture is selected. Object, go to Transform, and then hit Reflect. Once you have the Reflect key hit, it's going to ask you some options. We are going to be reflecting this vertically. So I have it here, selected, hit OK. And when I unclick, there's my picture. It's reflected. Now, some of you might actually like it reflected better. Then you would just leave it the normal way. However you want to print it is how it needs to look. So I have mine pretty well set here. Now, but what if I really wanted to play and experiment and change the different colors? I can show you guys how to do that next. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and save this image because once I change it, it's almost impossible to go backwards. So I really like this picture, so I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to hit Save As. First, let me experiment with something. If I hit Save, let me see. You can hit Save or Save As, so either one will work. When you save it, make sure that you don't save it as an Illustrator file. You're going to want to save it as a PDF file. So I'm going to go ahead and save it as a PDF. And I'm going to make sure that it's on my desktop. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Save. It's going to ask you a bunch of questions. And I'm going to just actually click this off. Right now I have it where I can view my PDF after saving, but I don't need to do that. So anyway, don't mind me. Just go ahead and hit Save PDF. So mine is ready, good to go, and saved. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to play with the colors. So again, I'm going to make sure my image is selected. It should look like a bunch of little ants. And once it does, I can go up to the top, and there's this little gray color wheel that says Recolor Artwork. It only shows up if the picture's selected, so it's not going to be up there if you don't have your image selected. So again, I'm going to make sure my image is selected. I can hit the little Recolor Artwork, and what would be nice is to be able to see the artwork and this screen at the same time. So for a second, I'm just going to cancel it. I'm going to move my screen over a little bit, and then I'm going to reselect it, hit my Recolor Artwork. Now I can kind of see both at the same time, which is helpful. So this is kind of cool. So the first thing I'm going to show you is that it brings up all the colors that you already currently have. You remember we have 6 colors. I have a lot of different shades of white, and yes, I would make all of those colors customly when we're going to print these. But for this, let's say I just wanted to change this color slightly. So I could take this color, select it, and I could change this color just slightly if I wanted to, or whatever. Now obviously I don't like that, so I'm going to hit cancel for a second. I'm going to go back. And then, but you could do that. So you could select these different colors and really play with the toggles down here. Otherwise, there are some other fun things that you can do as well. So another way to do this is, let me see if I can go here. If I click this little thing, so I clicked this, limits the color group to colors in a swatch library. So I click this little option, and these are actual like color groups that they've already pre-assigned. So I might like the art history option and go to like Impressionism or something. And then it kind of gave me a whole new color scheme here. And again, if I like these but I don't want to quite, maybe I want them a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. Let's say I wanted this dark green to be just a little deeper. I think you should be able to just adjust it. Oh, no, it's not going to do it there. We'll have to play with that a little bit, but I'm sure that there is a way that we can do that. But let's go back here and go, I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to play with, like, let's see what Middle Ages looks like. Oh, that's kind of nice, actually. So that's cool. When I click this, I should be able to also mess with something that looks like this. So I clicked up here, and I changed it. And then what would be really fun, let me see if we can, there are all sorts of things that you can play with in order to recolor this. So if I really wanted to, I can move this dial around and change some things this way. So that's actually kind of nice right there. So I might like some of these color schemes. Let's say I like this one, and I hit OK. Again, before I go and change it, I'm gonna go ahead and save this again as a new image. So I'm gonna save as this time. Don't just hit save or it's gonna resave over your picture. This time I'm gonna save it as 2. And again, I'm gonna make sure it's a PDF. I've got it saving to my desktop and I'm gonna hit save. Save PDF. Okay, so once I've saved it as a new file this time, remember now I'm Mrs. Hannah 2 because I kind of like this picture and maybe I want to save this as an option. I can go back again and just keep re-editing. So again, I'm just selecting it. I'm hitting this little color wheel up here. And before I mess with any of this, I can even show you that if you go to edit, it'll give you this custom color wheel. So if you wanted to just change it just slightly, so maybe I want to make this dark just a little bit darker, I could play with that. And again, if I liked it, I would save it as another option. So I would save it as Mrs. Hannah 3. Okay, once I get this color, if I like it, maybe I want to make it more black. I could change that with messing with the toggles. So there's just unlimited ways to edit this picture. And this part of the process could take you guys a few days to do, just to get to where you really like the image that you're using. And once you have the image you're using, all we have to do is print it out. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do that really quickly. So if I just close this out for a second, and let's say I'm going to go back to that original image. I liked Hannah 1. I'm going to bring it open. I'm going to make sure that it's the PDF this time. So I'm looking at it as the PDF. It's going to open it. And when I go to File, Print, it's going to ask you which printer you'd like to use. And it's going to show you some options. So I want to make sure that my printer says Leonardo. Okay. Yours might not say X2, I'm not sure. But it's going to say Leonardo. And then you want to make sure that it's filling the page here. And you would just hit OK. And you are good to go. And it should print to Leonardo, which is my colored laser printer, over on the counter. And we're all set. And that is the end of this tutorial.